What's going on, guys? Jake Boley with BarBend.com. Today we're going to be breaking down the conventional deadlift setup. We're going to talk about the 5 steps to finding your perfect deadlift setup, 2 big things to avoid, and now let's take it to step 1, finding the proper foot placement. With foot placement, we're going to break it into 2 sections, where the bar should lie over the foot, and then also our stance width. So now where should the bar lie? For a majority of athletes, it's going to be right over the midfoot area. So what that means is when I'm looking down at my feet right now, I can see that that bar is covering the midfoot. So now will this vary a little bit based off of things like shin length, femur length, and an athlete's height? Yes, but for a majority of the population and beginners, the midfoot is a great place to start to teach you how to deadlift efficiently. Now let's talk about stance width. So stance width is going to vary a little bit based off of how you're built, but for a majority of folks, it's going to be between hip and shoulder length. The big thing is that you're not going too wide to where your knees are going valgus, or too narrow to where you're having to cat back or your hips are rising up a little bit too quickly. So in terms of foot placement and finding your stance, it's going to be about the midfoot under the bar with where the foot lies, and then the stance is going to be based off of how you're built and what feels most comfortable without promoting any form of form breakdown during the deadlift. All right, step 2, now that we found our foot placement, we know our stance width, let's talk about grip. So a grip is also going to come down to what feels most comfortable for you, but a couple things to keep in mind is that you don't want to grip too wide to where it almost causes your lats to disengage and pull out, and you also don't want to grip too narrow to where you're almost knocking your knees in as you pull. So a good way to kind of think about it is when you set and you have that nice strong positioning and your knees are angled slightly out so your hips don't come in and the knees don't come in, think about lightly touching the forearm and elbow joint here to the outside of the knees. And now what that's going to do is essentially when I pick it up, it causes no friction between the elbow and the knee, so there's no knee variance, but also when I hinge to bring that bar back down, it allows me to cleanly do so with also not knocking into my knees or causing any kind of variance in my stance. All right, step 3 of setting up for the conventional deadlift, setting the back. This is the most important step of our 5 steps when setting up. Some athletes may already know how to set the back, but if you're brand new to deadlifting, or let's say you're just starting out with this movement, I'm gonna teach you a quick tip to kind of learn what it feels like to set the back as opposed to just kind of showing you. So what we're gonna do for this quick tip is we're gonna take our midfoot stance. We have our stance width that feels most comfortable for our bodies. And now before we would normally bring our shins down as we grip the bar like a normal deadlift, I'm gonna challenge you to just bend down and grip the bar and keep that shin nice and vertical. So that's gonna basically look like as if we're pulling the bar, or the weight for that matter, with poor form and we have a rounded back. So we set, we bend down and grip the bar, and now once we have our grip, we're then gonna bring these shins forward. And what that's gonna do is doing this movement is going to have us naturally set and create that nice setback angle. It's going to help us feel the tension into where we're pulling up on the bar a little bit and we have that tension in our hamstrings and glutes. And it's basically going to be our beginning basis for starting a set back. Now, will that vary a little bit based off of your anthropometrics and how you like to pull? Yes, it can, but for a lot of beginners or just the majority of the recreational lifter, doing this will be the perfect way to understand what it's like to set the back for your body. All right, step 4 of setting up for the conventional deadlift. This is going to be pulling the slack out of the bar. Pulling the slack out of the bar is critical for deadlifting for 2 essential reasons. And number 1, it helps us from having the hips shoot up too quickly, which then can cause any kind of lumbar flexion or rounding. And 2, it helps us maintain a strong hip and set back angle, which allows us to move the most weight possible while also safely. So what does it mean to physically pull slack out of the bar? One of my favorite cues to use comes from strength coach Dave Tate, and that cue is to put the scapula or shoulder blades into the back pockets. And so what that's going to mean is once we've set on the bar, we have our midfoot placement, our stance width, we've gripped the bar, and we've set the back, we're then going to think retract the scapula or shoulder blades and then depress them. So what that's going to do, it's going to engage the upper back and then engage the lats. By doing so, it's going to help us do 3 things really well. Number 1, it's going to help us maintain that strong hip and back angle. That's going to help kind of prevent injury by any kind of lumbar or lower back rounding. Number 2, it's going to help us create full body tension by feeling the weight on the ground and kind of getting ready to lift. And number 3, it can help with our speed off the floor. By creating a relationship between full body tightness and the weight on the ground, it can help us kind of initiate the pull by staying nice and tight as opposed to being a little bit loose and letting the hips shoot up too quickly and losing power off the ground. All right, step 5 and the final step of setting up for the conventional deadlift is putting it all together. This is putting together steps 1 through 4 and making a nice, clean, and efficient movement. So now that we have our midfoot under the bar, our preferred stance width, we're gonna really grip the floor with our feet. We're gonna bend down, set the back so we have a nice amount of tension throughout the posterior chain, so the glutes, hamstrings, the back. We're gonna pull the shoulder blades back into the pockets, so we're gonna retract and then depress the scapula or shoulder blades, and that's gonna engage our upper back and lat musculature to keep that bar nice and close. Our shoulder blades are over the bar. We're not pulling it behind. We're gonna be nice and powerful with the shoulder blades over or directly over the bar. And then our final cue is hip extension at the top with a strong locked out knee compared to hyperextending in the lumbar. So as you can see, there's a lot of tension throughout my posterior chain. That bar is nice and close. My shoulder's over the bar. And as I'm locking out, I'm hitting hip extension with a strong locked out knee as opposed to hyperextending in the lumbar. And that concludes our conventional deadlift setup video. Hopefully at least one of the tips or cues within this video was able to kind of help you and push your lifting to the next level. This is only the setup for the deadlift, and while it is a simple movement, it's definitely a movement we want to perform safely and efficiently. If you want to learn more about the deadlift, the benefits and the form that come along with the movement as a whole, make sure to Google BarBend and deadlift.